48th and 41st, where the Bhagavan is kind of assuaging the doubts and anxieties in Arjuna, who is sort of bothered that you're telling me that it's very important for a sadhaka, for an aspirant who's looking for liberation, to first clean up his mind, clean up his act. And then, as a result of this antakarana suddhi, he's kind of ready. He has done some kind of preparatory work for entering into jnana yoga. And then, after his jnana yoga, there are a lot of things he has to do. He has to understand the texts, meditate on the meanings of these texts, Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana he has to do. Then he'll continuously meditate on it, and he has to do Mononasa, Vasanakshaya. If he hasn't done it earlier, he has to also do that. Because if he's not a Kritopasti, he starts doing this, he has to do all three at the same time. And after a long period, then he'll graduate to have what is Jivana Mukti or Videha Mukti. It's a long process. It's quite possible that he may have to deal with the termination of his physical being. He may have to deal with death. What happens to him if he dies in between? He isn't able to complete the course. So he has left his karma tatparata, all kinds of commitments that earlier he fulfilled as a grihastha. And he used to do a lot of nitya karmas, a lot of kamya karmas, and naimittika karmas. You remember the basic difference between these three, they keep coming again and again. Nitya is what you continue to do every day, like Sandhya Vandanam, Agnihotradi. I mean, we are not doing it today, but Nitya Karma is what you do for the sake of Yava Jivet Agnihotram Juhiyat. That is the saying that your hair is dark, you have been threaded, you are married, you have a son. Then you have to start doing Agnihotra till the very last day on earth. For a person who is believing in Purva Mimamsa, that is what is prescribed for a Traivanika in the ancient days. And then Kamya Karmas is what you do, for example, for Swarga Prapti. You want to have a son, you want to have a lot of livestock, or want to have a good agricultural harvest. There are different rituals which are performed to fulfill these things. And there are some Naimittika Karmas which includes Prayaschita Karma. Like, for example, you do Sraddhas and Tarpanas and separate pujas and during Navaratris. These are different, or special puja on Sankrant. All these are done. And these are Naimittika karmas. There are nimittas, there are causes as to why you have certain special pujas on certain days. So Nitya karmas, Naimittika karmas, which includes Prayaschita, is Atma Suddhai. So, for example, if a person has committed a few wrongs, he has a change of heart, he wants to restart his life, he does a few Prayaschita homas. And there are certain other rituals, like you have these, what do you call, Chandrayana Vrata, Kuchra Chandrayana Vrata. I was telling that your food and water intake kind of increases and decreases in proportion to the increase and decrease in the Chandra Kala, the moon rising and, waxing and waning moon. Proportionately, you have to increase and decrease your intake of food and water. Very difficult kind of a ritualistic sadhana. All these things I have left behind, karma tyagat, because he has become a jnana yogi and he has not got atma suddhi, he hasn't got moksha, atma sakshatkara. In between, he is dying, he is agonizing over that. What did Bhagavan say? No, you don't have to be scared that you will become a uvaya vibrasta, because he says partha naivaha partha naiveha namutra vinasas tasya vidyate nahi kalyanakrit kaschit durgatim tata gacchati. My dear friend, my son, don't get worried. This kind of a person will never ever undergo any kind of agonizing experience. And then he gives a lot of explanation as to why, because he hasn't done any papas. He has done a lot of good things, and then we had discussed what kind of lives a person can have, right? You have a lot of papa, you become like a insect or reptile or anything, and if you have done a lot of punyas, then you have devayana and pitriyana. Devayana is for upasakas, people who do a lot of prayers and meditations. And Pitriyana is for people who do a lot of ritual performances. And then there is something called Manushya Janma, which is a Papa Punya mix. And then there is a lot of Punya and Jnana and everything, then you get Moksha. That's the final thing. And this fellow hasn't got anything. He hasn't done Papa because he has become a sannyasi. Maybe some Papas, but he kind of has overcome. He's not doing any Papa. He has become a Mumukshu and is a Bidheya Atma. So what happens to him? Then Bhagavan says that there is no, please understand, he shall never ever experience anything bad. Then reassures him by saying that he is going to be born in a very, very good social station. He'll be born in a king's house or in a very prosperous person's house so that he doesn't have a sense of desperation, and he's not provoked, pushed down in his life to commit any errors of judgment because of life situations. A lot of poor people are otherwise ethical, but they have to compromise with their moral sense of what is good and what is bad because the life situation sometimes pushes them to commit a lot of errors. But otherwise, they're very, very normal, good people like any of us, like all middle class people. So he's saying, Prapya Punya Kritam Lokan Ushitva Saswati Sama. They'll go to Brahma Loka and stay there for a long time. Suchinam Srimatam Gehe Yoga Vrasto Vijayate. Yoga Vrasta is one. Please clarify and remember it again and again. It's not somebody who leaves his sadhana halfway. It's somebody who continues to do his sadhana, but last moment is Yoga Chalita Manasha because of the physical ailment. He may be undergoing to drop his body because it's time to leave. That sort of a person who is agonizing on his deathbed and he is no more mokshakami at that moment, does he go down? Bhagavan says no. He'll be born in a very good family. Having mentioned one possibility that he'll be born in a materially prosperous social condition so that he can study a lot, he can do a lot of punyas. To do a lot of punyas, you need to be well off. A poor man can do very limited charitable work. I mean, if a person has a lot of money, he's more capable of earning a lot of punyas because this money he can spend. If a person doesn't have a lot of money, even if he has a good heart, he doesn't have much of an opportunity. So that's why Gandhi was talking about capitalism as a kind of prostitution. Actually, that is the spiritual truth. That if a person has a lot of money, God has given him an opportunity to engage in charitable work, which will get him a lot of punya. So, having said that, he's now giving another alternative because he's kind of testing Arjuna also. He's giving an alternative, and I'll tell you the secret meaning of this is very important. He's saying, Athava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam etadhi dulhavataram loke janma yad idrisham. Athava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam. If he is not born in the house of a king or an aristocratic family or a big business family, then where is he born? It's quite possible that he'll be born in a very poor Brahmin family. It's quite possible. Or maybe in the house of a saintly person, an extremely saintly, irrespective of whatever be the social title he has. He'll be born to a person who is ethically very correct. Dhimata, in the house of a guy who is Dhiman, who is very wise. And Yoginam Eva, and then he's a yogi. He's a wise, that means what? He's now referring to his cognitive ability to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong. So he's born to a father and a mother who are having high power of discrimination. So they are not going to jump into the ocean of life. They have a child. They don't have too much money. Necessarily no money actually in this alternative. Athava yoginam eva. So it is hinted that he will not have a lot of money because otherwise this alternative will become superfluous. Bhagavan has already mentioned the first alternative, the easier one, is to be born in a very prosperous family where you will have the access to all material sadhanas, all material means to do a lot of study, a lot of punyas, and be compassionate and kind and fill others' lives with your help. That opportunity comes first. Even a little harder than that, which appears to be a little inferior materially, is the birth in the house of a guy who is a punyatma, who is completely a yogi and he's a dhima. He's a wise person. So he's sastragya. You don't have to run around looking for a guru. He'd be right in your house. The father himself will be so learning. So, etadi dullabhataram loke janma yad idrisam. This kind of a birth is even harder to have in samsara because there are very limited number of parents like that. Most of the parents, I mean, finding a very well-educated and cultured parents is also not that easy. But then finding somebody who has got all these and he is renounced, he has become a very quiet person, he's a very scholarly guy to be born in that kind of a family is even harder. Let's look at how that is being interpreted by Shankaracharya, and we'll go to the next sloka, which is even more interesting. अथवा योगिनाम एव कुले भवति धीमताम एतद् दुर्लभतरम लोके जन्म यद ईदृशम अथवा श्रीमताम कुलात अन्यस्मिन् Sriman is what? Who has got a lot of wealth, and we had discussed yesterday that Sriman would also mean that somebody who is kind of a, all the time oriented towards doing things which are auspicious. Okay, so that is what is mentioned yesterday. Srimatam was specifically mentioned yesterday by Madhusudan Saraswati. Just let me look at how he had done a beautiful interpretation of that word, Srimatam. Vasana Saraswati Brahma. Okay, so Srimatam he had interpreted as Vibhuti Matam, Vibhuti Matam. So having a lot of siddhis and a lot of, it could be material, it could be also, something which is non-material. But basically is referring to an ambience where you have, you just imagine, there are a lot of families where you may have a lot of money, but the parents may not have a good aesthetic sense. They may not have a good ethical sense. So they have a lot of money, but they live like animals. You have seen that. But then there are families, they don't have so much money, but they have a great aesthetic sense, and they have some library, they educate their children, they also introduce their children to some music and painting and art, and have a holistic kind of an approach to life. So that Sri is not just material wealth. The Sri thing sort of refers to the whole beauty of their life, the ambience in which this child is born. So he's saying that Atava Srimatam Kulat Anyasmin. Sri here will mean that this particular thing who has all these good qualities, which are externally visible, like a good aesthetic sense, and he'll have a lot of artifacts or paintings at home. Maybe some music classes are going on. The mother sings very well. Maybe one aunt is a good painter. Maybe uncle is a great, he's a musician. Yeah, they have all these things, and they are, well-to-do in the sense they don't have any problem with regard to food or education and stuff like that. Anyasmin, in a sharp contrast to this kind of a materially prosperous family, yoginam eva daridranam kule bhavati jayate dhimatam buddhimatam kule. So there are two. First is Sri, the other one is Dhi. Now this is, you can interpret, this is a Brahmanical disjunction. You can criticize it, that Dhi and Sri don't have to be opposed to each other, right? I mean, in parts of India, there's always this misconception that if you are a devotee of Saraswati, then Lakshmi doesn't give you much. And if you're a devotee of Lakshmi, then Saraswati doesn't give you much. I mean, this is one of the superstitions they have. Dhi and Sri don't have to be opposed to each other. Okay. But here, there's a specific point what is being mentioned. External prosperity can be a basic minimum condition for cultivating internal prosperity, which is psychic, yogic, intellectual. External prosperity, in a way, is inferior to internal prosperity or internal glow that a person experiences because of what he knows. and what he can think, correctly he can think. And therefore, a person who is internally endowed may not be externally endowed. Sometimes this external endowment of birth in a very good family and a lot of money, good social circles, can indirectly obstruct this ability of the child to be internally oriented, because they kind of sometimes work at loggerheads with each other. That is the traditional Indian view. Not always. We have had examples of children born in very prosperous family. One family is this Rabindranath Tagore's father was a saintly person, but he was a well-off person. Kesav Chandra Sen was a well-off person. But then you have had a lot of examples where wisdom and poverty kind of are seen to go together, and extra material simplicity that you see. Let's imagine if you look at the way a saint looks at life, the beauty of his thinking, and his heartfulness. If you look at an Ishwara Chandra Vidyasagara, for example, Acharya Kripalini, and there are a lot of such people, who have, you look at that Vinova Bhave, who lived an extremely simple life. They lived that saintly life by staying away from all material prosperities. If they would have also put their hands on it, sometimes it's not seen to go along with these things. But then there is a tradition like in Sri Aurobindo, who they don't believe that material prosperity is kind of a drawback. They said spiritualize everything. Living in a building is not a problem. Looking at the building as a means for material happiness is a problem. If you can turn that building into a temple, into a library, into a meditation hall. So how you treat where you live is more to do with your understanding of this physical reality. Physical reality per se is neither materialist nor spiritualist. Depends on how you are trying to design it in your mind and how you relate to it. However, whatever you may say, whether it's the Indian tradition or even the Catholic tradition, there is a lot of importance given to material simplicity as one important theme in one's spiritual life, in even Buddhism. So they give because you have to declutter yourself, and less is more kind of an approach. Because if you have a lot of baggage, if you have a lot of clutter with you, it's so difficult to have a clear, clean, free mind which can meditate on the truth. That is the idea. So here he's saying, Athava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam etadi dulhavataram loke janma yad idrisham. Athava srimatam kulat anyasmin. Other than that, anyasmin means elsewhere. Where yoginam eva daridranam kule bhavati jayate srimatam buddhimatam. Then this yoga vrashta will be born maybe in the house of a poor person who is a great yogi. So he is born, just imagine how privileged he is. If he's a vairagi and he has done serious sadhana, some leg is left of his preparation for moksha, then he's born to a teacher, maybe who is a brahmagyani, born again as a, out of comparison, born as a teacher or an acharya, he's born right there. Then he's quickly having access right in his childhood to that kind of a teacher, so he can fulfill his dream, which he has tried to fulfill by half in the previous life. Etati janma yat daridranam yoginam kule. This kind of a life, which happens in the house of a poor or a yogi, kule durlhavataram. It's difficult to get. Why? Dukkha labdhyataram. It's very difficult to get it. Purvam apekya loke janma yad idrisam yathokti vishesane kule. So he's saying that it's very difficult, in fact, to get this kind of a birth. Now let's look at how Madhusudana Saraswati. There are other acharyas who have also mentioned, who have also dealt with it, but we are not going into different other tikas. We'll mostly limit ourselves to Shankaracharya and Madhusudana Saraswati, unless we have a few new things to take from other tikas. अथवा योगिनाम एव कुले भवति योगे धीमताम एतदि दुर्लभतरम लोके जन्म यदिदृशम श्रद्धा वैराग्यादि kalyan gunadhikye. When this person who has done a lot of sadhana, there are a few conditionalities for him to choose a birth not in a prosperous family but in a poor family, in the house of a poor Brahmin, for example, who is a very spiritually oriented. We are talking about a certain historical condition. And so that you have to keep in mind. So maybe in today's world, he'll be born as the son of a very, very pure academic. Okay, these days academics also have very good lives, but then, they are materially simpler than maybe who is a big corporate guy or he's an investor or a businessman. So he'll be born in Shraddha Vairagya di Kalyana Gunadike. This fellow who is doing his sadhana, he had serious Vairagya. He had already succeeded in doing Vasana Tyaga. Then what happens? Tu Bhoga Vasana Virahat Punya Kritam. This particular sadhaka who has done a lot of punya and he does his karma and niskama karma and he is always matpara, he is Ishvara Paraka. Then he goes with a sense of surrender to an acharya and learns the sastras. And then what happens? He has serious vairagya in him. In Bhoga Vasana Virahat, no more hidden desire for again having life in a prosperous family. Punyagratam. Lokan aprapya eva. Thus he had mentioned that Lokan usitva, going to Brahmaloka and enjoying life for a while. No, he'll not go there. Because he has no more any desperate craving for a very good life. He doesn't have that craving. And therefore, without getting that Brahmaloka, Swargaloka Prapti, Yoginam eva daridranam brahmanam na tu srimatam ragyam kule bhavati dhimatam brahma vidyavatam. This child will be born in the house of a yogi who may be, it's just a upalakshana, it's just an example, because in those days, those people who are busy with the sastras were obviously traditional Brahmins. So he's referring. But in today's world, maybe he'll be born in the house of a yoga teacher, or maybe even a social worker, maybe an environmental activist, maybe a poet or writer or philosopher, but somebody who is leading a good life, not an unethical kind of a person. Daridranam Brahmanam, not to Srimatam Ragyam Kulik, not in the house of a king or a prosperous person. Bhavati Dhimatam, Brahma Vidyavatam. This parent is a Dhiman, he has wisdom, and is Brahma Vidya with, because he has the excellence. And this son is kind of, it's all about having that connectivity with what you were doing in the previous word. Etena yoginam iti na karmi grahanam. So what is clear? Why God is sending this guy directly into the house of a yogi is Yoga Vrashta, because he was already very advanced in his yoga sadhana. He was not at the initial stage. If it is at the initial stage, after leaving his karma yoga, some sanskaras are still hiding in him. He comes and starts, he takes sannyasa, vairagya has not been completely successful. If he dies, then he'll be born in a very rich family, so that anything left over of the bhoga vasana is fulfilled first. Then again the vairagya bhava will come very quickly, so he'll walk away again. Okay, so that is why he's not a karmi. He was a completely sarvakarma sannyasi. It's very clear that he was at a very advanced stage of sadhana and he was not a karma yogi. He was a jnana yogi at a very advanced stage. Yas suchinam srimatam ragyam grihe yoga bhrashta janma tadapi दुर्लभम अनेक सुकृत साध्य सिकृत साध्य to atmoksha paravasayitvatsa. He's saying that if a person is born in the house of a person who is Sriman, a lot of wealth, prosperity, material prosperity, then good education and aesthetic sensibility, all that is there. Would you compare that in the house of a king or an aristocrat? He may be born there. Compared to that, if you look at the Yoga Vrashta Janama in the house of a yogi, that is even harder to get because you don't have too many people doing that kind of sadhana in this life. Dulhavam, Aneka Sukrita Sadhya. You must have done a lot of punya, Aneka Sukrita. If you have done a lot of punyas, as a result of that, Tvat moksha paravasayitvatsa. Because why? Because if you are born in this kind of family, then your access to the secrets of sadhana, which will give you liberation, is much easily accessible. And therefore, Bhagavan says it's durlavatara. Even though externally it could be a little miserable compared to the life in a rich man's house. But from the point of view of sadhana, this is definitely a more privileged position. So he's privileging this kind of a materially poorer life but with spiritual richness and access to the ways and means of sadhana. If a person has that, he's he's like, for example, I was looking at. I mean, you can look at a lot of people around, and recently I think somebody was giving this advice that the Sarvapriyananda of the Ramakrishna order, who is now sort of heading the ministry in New York, he was speaking, I think, in an interview that he was born in an IS officer's family in Bhubaneswar, and I think they are sort of from Bengal. He was in Bhubaneswar, but his grandfather's sister was always encouraging him to go to Ramakrishna mission. So as soon as he finished his management degree, he became a brahmachari. Just imagine this particular sanyoga. His parents and others wanted him to be materially successful. But there was this aunt who always pushed him to keep going to Ramakrishna mission and appreciated it. And the child grew up with that encouragement of the grand aunt that the boy decides when he grows up to take sannyas as soon as he finishes his MBA degree. Now, this particular sanyoga, that is the auspicious influence, which was a driver, the main trigger for kind of enabling him to take that decision without any distraction. Otherwise, if there was maybe a person who would encourage him to get married, settle, it will take maybe many more years before he decides to change course of life, right? So that is how these spiritual influences are much harder to get. That is why it's glorified. एतेन योगिनाम इति च न कर्मि ग्रहणम यत् सूचिनाम श्रीमताम राज्ञाम विरजोगभ्रष्ट जन्म तदपि दुर्लभम अनेक सुकृत साध्यत्वात् मोक्ष पर्यवसायित्वात् च यत्तु सूचिनां दरिद्राणां ब्राह्मणानां ब्रह्म विद्यावतां कुले जन्म एतद्धि प्रसिद्धं सुखादिवत्. So he's giving an example. Where do you have a particular example? Student may ask, sir, you are saying that he'll be born in the house of a poor Brahmin. Can you tell us how is that such a good thing? Then he is giving an example. Durlavataram, durlavadavi durlabam loke. It's very hard. It's harder among the hard things in life to get this kind of a life, an opportunity to be born in the house of a, intellectually rich guy, spiritually rich guy. Yad idrisam. Then he is mentioning who? Brahma Vidyavatam Kule Janma Etadi Prasidham Sukadivat. This example of Sukha. Sukha Muni was born to whom? Vyasadeva. So imagine how privileged he was. The person who is a compiler of the Vedas, who is one of the wisest guy of his era. You are born to him. What a privilege it is. And just imagine, Sukha was so wise that he was not even wearing any clothes. And Bhagavatam is after, just imagine that he Sutta recorded, he told Bhagavatam to his dialogue with Janaka Maharshi. Just look at Sukha Muni. So, Durlavataram Durlavadapi Durlavam Loke Jatirisam Sarva Pramada Karana Sunyam. Whatever is Pramada Karana, what is Pramada? You have the physical ability, but you don't do it. Why? The mind is working in a negative way. Exactly opposite to what you want to achieve in your life. The mind is pulling you somewhere else. Now, this is considered to be Durlava because Sarva Pramada Karana Sunyam, all the pramadas that a lot of people on earth experience, and it has a cause. What is that cause? Avidya and ignorance and Purva Sanskara, negative Sanskara. This life is without those negativities. And therefore, this fellow will not have a mind which is confused, which jumps around. He will not have those mental problems. Jarma iti dityaha struyate. So he is praising that second category of la. But bhoga vasana sunyatvena. Then there is no desire for material, for commodious living, or comfort, material comfort in life. Sarva karma sannyasa rahatvat. And therefore, this is worthy of a sarva karma sannyasi that would like to choose this kind of a life. If he's having no option but to die, cannot have moksha, to rather prefer to be born like this instead of being born in a rich man's house where there'll be a lot of distractions. Okay, and then let's go to the next sloka. One might ask, why these two lives and why the second life is Durlavatara? Why are you saying that the birth in the house of a wiser guy who is materially poorer is harder to get. You're praising it too much. Arjuna might have some doubts. All of us can have. Bhagavan has to clarify that, and he shall. He's clarifying it in the next sloka. Yasmat, why? A person might say, why are you saying that this house is this kind of a birth is dullavatara? It's difficult to get. Why are you praising it so much? Then he's saying, Yasmat, tatratam buddhi sanyogam lavate purva dehikam yatate cha tato bhuyaha sansidhau purunandana. Tatra tam buddhi sanyogam purva dehikam buddhi sanyogam lavate. That fellow, tatra, where in that kind of a birth? Tatra where? This is one problem. You can underline that word tatra. Tatra can mean indeed after the birth of Yoga Bhrasta in either of these houses. One is the rich man's house, the other one is wise parents but materially poorer. Some of the commentators are saying Tatra can refer to both these births. It is essentially the birth of a Yoga Bhrasta. He has to continue his journey towards self knowledge. Whether he is born in a rich guy's house or a poor guy's house, he shall continue his journey. And therefore, Tatra should include both birth in a rich guy's house or a poor guy's house. However, some of the commentators, including Shankaracharya and Anandagiri, they have a specific emphasis given to Tatra as in the house of that yoginam himatam grihe. When you are born in the house of a wise guy, not a srimatam grihe, not in the house of a rich guy, but in the house of a wise and a yogi, that kind of a person, Tatra. Because this follows this immediately, and he has already glorified this as Dullavatara, and so it's only logical that Tatra, the meaning of Tatra, is related to the previous verse in 42nd, not the 41st, okay, which some other commentators do. Not much of a problem. These are scholarly debates. Tatra tam buddhi sanyogam lavate purvadehikam. Purvadehikam, purvadehe bhavam iti purvadehikam. Whatever punya, because of punya, whatever intellectual capacities, you must be watching that in different TV channels, sometimes on YouTube. There are certain children who are very young, but they're prodigies. They start playing music and they perfect it so fast at a very young age. Pablo Picasso was a great painter. By 6, 7 years of age, he was painting his mother. He didn't have any problem. He was a great painter. And similarly, you know about guys who have extremely surprising levels of cognitive felicity. They have a lot of mental power. And it appears as if they have already read these things in the previous life. So that is what is referring to here, that buddhi sanyoga, that ability to be yogic and connect with mumuchuta, those good qualities that you have nurtured in the previous birth, he suddenly gets them back. It's like you had that hard disk, that pen drive, the Yoga Bhrashta pen drive, in which all your punyas and whatever jnana yoga you have done, these are all stored in that small pen drive, flash drive, and you leave your body, you're born again, and that flash drive gets activated. You can access it. When you access it, that buddhi sanyogam lavate. Yatate cha tato bhuya. And therefore, once he gets the pen drive, he gets all the wisdom that he had forgotten temporarily because of death. Because when he's born as a child, he will again cry. He may have been a Vedantist, may have studied a lot, but he'll cry for milk, fight with mother. It will go on, the game will go on for a few years. Then suddenly he has access to that flash drive, he remembers everything. And then he decides to have to do it. Then what he does, Yatate tor cha tato bhuyaha. As soon as he gets it, thereafter, after Buddhi Sanyoga, tataha, after that, bhuyaha samsiddhau, he tries to realize much more than what he had done in the last birth. Kurunandana, hey Kurunandana. Now, there's a beautiful interpretation given by a couple of commentators. Just look at who is asking this question. This question is asked by Arjuna. What is he experiencing? He's experiencing a lot of vairagya even in the warfare. What does that symbolize? Bhagavan is hinting to him, more or less. And there are Arjunas in many of us. Bhagavan is kind of hinting, either we are born in a poor family or in a rich family. By mentioning that Yoga Brashta is born either in a rich family or in a poor family, Bhagavan is giving us a chance to claim that we are Yoga Brashtas. Actually, all of us are. So either you're born in a very rich family or in a poor family. And so in either of these cases, if you're a Yoga Brashta, you should figure out how to access that flash drive, the memory of your sadhana in the last birth. In case of Arjuna, Bhagavan is kind of hinting that you have a lot of vairagya, but there is a lot of bhoga vasana because of which you wanted to fight the war. Do your karma. You don't have that strong vairagya in you. If it were so, you would be born in the house of Vyasa, not through Dhritarashtra and stuff like that, and Pandu and all. You'd be directly born in the house of maybe Vidura or somebody, and you'll become a monk and you'll go to the forest. No, that didn't happen. You are a prince. You are the greatest archer in art. So there was a lot of bhogavasana, but also strong vairagya is also there in you. Arjuna was a great fighter, but remember, he had great vairagya. He's a remarkable character. The most beautiful angelic female, Urvashi. Also, I think Urvashi or Rambha, I don't remember, I think Urvashi approached him for affection and he treated her as mother. She cursed him, but he didn't fall for her. So he was a great Vairagi. He wins over in that shooting competition. He gets the hand of a beautiful woman. Mother says, whatever food you have got, you share it. Who will do that? I mean, he would like to have a fight with the mother. What nonsense you are saying. But imagine what kind of a yogi he is. Arjuna is a great Vairagi. A lot of people see him as an arrogant, this and that. But if you look at the life of Arjuna, he's a great Jnani and a Vairagi. Because it's not very easy that you have got the hand of a girl and your mother is saying that she's not yours and you share it with your brother. I mean, look, forget about the sociological aspect of it. If someone says that, okay, this girl is not yours, this girl is going to marry someone else, not easy to accept, but Arjuna did. So this great Vairagya, Bhagavan is also kind of hinting to Arjuna that you are already a yoga bhrashta. Why are you worried that where you will go in the next birth? You are a yoga bhrashta, you are born as a prince. So when you finish this bhogavasanatmaka kriyakalapa, fighting the war and competing and winning and whatever, very quickly you will be out of it. So don't worry about it. That's the kind of assurance Bhagavan is giving indirectly. That is how some of the commentators are looking at it. Let's look at how Shankaracharya interprets, and then we'll go into very, very resourceful and beautiful explanation and elaboration of this sloka in Madhusudana. तत्र तं बुद्धिसंयोगं लभते पूर्वदेहिकं यतते च ततो भूयः संसिधौ कुरुनन्दन तत्र योगिनां कुले तं बुद्धिसंयोगं. See, Shankaracharya makes it very clear. He tatra, there, tatra means there. He's not including the birth in the Srimatam Gehe, the birth in a privileged house, materially prosperous house. That alternative is removing. He's taken the next one, verse number 42, where he will be born in the house of a poor but spiritually enriched, advanced family and would have access to parenting by a very, very wise person. That is the alternative he's taking. Tatra yoginam kule tang buddhi sanyogam. Buddhya sanyoga buddhi sanyogam lavate. He gets that buddhi sanyoga. What is that buddhi sanyoga? Purva dehikam purvasmin dehe bhavam purva dehikam. That particular buddhi sanyoga. Buddhi sanyoga is what? You asked. You get connected with a certain new way of looking at life. That is what we can refer to as Buddhist yoga. There's nothing called Buddhist yoga because this Buddhi evolves in us only. This Buddhist yoga is a metaphoric description of a spiritual transition in us from one level of understanding to another. And when we make that transition, we can describe that as connecting with a new way of relating to this universe. That is the Buddhist yoga which we had achieved in the previous life. If so, when you're born in this life and you get reconnected with that thread, then you restart your spiritual journey to reach your destination. And what is the destination? Self-knowledge. Jiva Brahma Aikya Jnana. And there is no duality, there is no fear. Because Dvaita Bhaya. If there are two people, you are afraid the other might attack you. When you realize there is just one thing, and it's the consciousness. You are that, everyone else is that. All dualities perish. That is what Vedanta says. Whether that is right or wrong, it can be a long debate and how to look at it. But this Advaita thing is a powerful interpretation which removes all kinds of layers of ignorance, which causes a restriction of our consciousness, restriction of the way we look at reality, and we feel small and less and desperate and stuff like that. This Vedanta sort of expands it. It's explosive in a way because you are sort of embracing the whole universe, not in physical sense, but in a spiritual sense, because you are seeing that substratum as one thing of which you are part. You might externally appear as different, but you're part of that. There is a great reassurance. This corona thing, just think about a Vedantic way of approaching it. Yes, people are dying, that's true. We might die, that's also true. We will die anyway, physically. Whether today because of corona or tomorrow because of some other disease, we're going to die. But to realize that all of us are part of that immovable, avikari, there is no change, nothing in that particular reality, gives us a kind of reassurance that what appears is false. Whether this good life or bad life or the threat of death, these are kind of illusory. That gives a peace of mind which we cannot get through either money or any kind of antibiotics or kind of injections or vaccines or anything. This kind of a spiritual vaccine elevates the consciousness to another level. This elevation is the Buddhi Sanyoga is referring. Buddhi Sanyoga lavate purvadehikam purvasmin dehe bhavam purvadehikam. Purvadehikam is an adjective here. And this is a qualifier of that Buddhi Sanyoga that you had achieved in your previous life. Yatate prayatnam karoti. Then he continues to do yatna. Yatate tataha tasmat. Tata means compared to what? What he had done before. Tasmat. From that. What is that? Purvakrita. What he had done previously. And what is that Purvakrita Sanskara? Whatever you had already experienced, the impressions are there in you. Bhuya Bahutaram Sansidho Sansidhi Nimittam He Guru Nandana. So he sort of goes to have greater realization of Brahman through all comprehensive sadhana. Now let us look at how the same thing is interpreted by Madhusudan Saraswati. He brings in again a lot of stuff from Yoga Vasistha and the Yoga Sutras to enrich our discussion here. The doubt he has is like this. Before I go into that, I just want to mention before, okay, let's finish this and we'll go there. Tatra tam buddhi sanyogam lavate purvadehikam yatate cha tato bhuyaha sansidho purunandana. Tatra viprakarepi janmani purvadehe bhavam purvadehikam. There are two kinds of lives. So, and these are two kinds of purvadehika. I told you that Madhusudana Saraswati Tatra is including also birth in the prosperous family. For Shankaracharya, he is only including birth in the yogi's house as closer to sadhana, towards moksha. If you're born in a yogic family, it's much easier. If you're born in a very prosperous family, it's a little longer journey, but it's good because your vasana bhoga, whatever is there, you can do it and get done with it. Sarva karma sannyasa Guru upasadana sravana manana nididhyasananam madhye yavat paryantam anushtitam tavat paryantam evatam brahmatmekya visayaya buddhaya sanyogam tat sadhana kalapam iti yavat. What is that buddhi sanyoga? He is explaining. Last birth, you had gone to the Guru after the sarva karma sannyasa, nishkama karma, purification, sarva karma sannyasa. Diksha, then Guru Upasadana. You go to the house of a Guru and ashram. Then Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. These are the means. And doing what? Madhye, Yavat Paryantam Anushtitam. Whatever you have done during the physical state of your life. Tavat Paryantam Eva Tam Brahmatmekya Visaya Buddhaya Sanyogam. Then the Brahma Atma, The Jivatma and the Brahman, they are just one reality. And in order to understand that, you had done some studies, you had had some realization, not a complete realization, but some realization. You reach till that point, whatever you had done. You reconnect with that. Sanyogam tat sadhana kalapam. Sadhana kalapam. Kalapa means a combination, an aggregation of the little, small, big realizations you had in the previous life. You are connecting with that. Sadhana kalapa. Yavat lavate. Lavate means prapnoti. He retrieves it. Na kevalam lavate eva kintu tatah labhantaram. Not only he gets it, but as soon as he gets it, what does he do? He starts his sadhana again. Bhuya adhikam labdhaya. And whatever he has got, he'll try to expand it. You had put some money in a bank. As soon as that matures and someone calls you up and says that, sir, that certificate of yours has matured, you bring back the money. Do you keep it at home? No. You'll put it in some other investment because you want to expand it further. Similarly, the spiritual thing, when he gets that flash drive, he remembers everything, puts it in his system. He gets, oh my God, I had done all that. He's reminded. He starts his sadhana again. Huyo adhikam labdhaya bhumed agrimam bhumim. He goes to the next level of his sadhana. He'll try to the next sopana, next step. Sampadayitum sansidho. Sansidhi moksha tan nimitam. Sansidhi is moksha and tan nimitam. In order for realizing that, yatate prayatnam koroti. He does his perseverance. He starts his sadhana. Yavan mukhyam bhumika sampadeti ityartha. Until he gets self-knowledge, until he has liberation, he continues to ascend to different stages of spiritual realization. He Guru Nandana, tavapi suchinam srimatam kule yoga prashta janma jatam iti purva vasana vasad anayasena eva jnana labho bhavisyati iti suchayitum mahaprabhavasya puroho kirtanam. You see, Bhagavan, by addressing Arjuna is Guru Nandana, is kind of hinting to him by telling him the story about Yoga Bhrashta, that you are also a Yoga Bhrashta. You are born as a Yoga Bhrashta. You have done a lot of sadhana. That's why you have so much of Vairagya. Purva Vasana Vasad. Because of some Vasana, you are born here. You become the big archer. And I fully recognize you are a Yoga Bhrashta. All of the brothers are ready to fight. Bhima doesn't have any compunction. Even Yudhishthira doesn't have any problem. Only you have philosophical problem. That is because of your previous sanskara, punya sanskara, that you have such thoughts. Anasana eva jnana lava bhavishyati. And therefore, because you have, I'm giving you the flash drive, reconnecting with that. I'm telling you the password. This whole dialogue of Lord Krishna is a password. This password he'll reconnect with all that he had studied. Bhavishyati iti suchayitam. So he's kind of hinting at that. Ayam artho bhagavat vasishta vasane vyaktaha yatha Sri Ramaha. So Bhagavan, Sri Rama also had asked a similar question to Vasishta, and Vasishta had answered it in the famous book Yoga Vasishta. Ekamatha ditiyamba tritiyam bhumika muta arudasya mritasyatha hidrisi Bhagavan gati. Hey Bhagavan, there are 7 stages in the Yoga Sutras, in the sadhanas. We had discussed that. You can re-look at sloka number 3rd chapter, 18th verse. Of course, that is not on YouTube. We'll upload it later on. But when we did the 18th sloka of the 3rd chapter, we had a long discussion on it. What Patanjali says is that first stage is Subhecha. First, you have some orientation. You want to do some sort of meditation. You want to do some Vedanta classes. You want to do some Samadhamadi, Sattva Sampati, Sravana Manana Nididhyasana, Subhecha, turning towards the auspicious. That is the first stage. Then what you have Vicharana. Then there is a further deepening of your consciousness. Third, Tanomanasa, the mind becomes subtler and sharper. And then when you succeed in these 3, then you have Sattvapatti. The first 3 stages are Jagrat Avastha. The 4th avastha is like Swapna avastha. Like in Swapna, whatever you see when you wake up, you treat that as false. Similarly, when you have Sattvapatti, you are in complete Sattva, you see the Sansara as Mithya, as illusory, as non-attractive, as non-substantial. That is the Sattvapatti. That is the first Upalabdhi. That is the first marker to reach. That is the first hurdle towards real sadhana to start from there on. So the first three are upaya, and the fourth one is apaya. The fourth one is the goal of the sadhanas you do the first three. And then you have another three, which are avantara vedas of Jivana Mukti. One is asansakti, non-attachment. You are not troubled by anything. Then you have padartha bhavana. You are meditating on the self. And we have discussed that earlier. You can again revisit that. Then finally, seventh is turiya, the chaturthavastha. That is deep susuti. Turiya is beyond that. That is the atmajnana you have. That is how the seven stages are mentioned. Now the question is, from a yogic point of view, if somebody is doing sadhana, he has not reached that level of sattvapatti. Because if he reaches sattvapatti, then even if he doesn't, he has got jivanmukti. You remember in jivanmukti there are two stages. One is what? You have tattva darsana, but in addition to that, you have mononasa and vasana. So you have jivanmukti also you are getting. Tattva darsana is there, but also jivanmukti. Then even if you are alive, you are liberated. Otherwise, tattva darsana has happened. You know this is all false. You have fundamentally transformed your consciousness. Even if you haven't had complete success with the goals of mononasa and vasana, because of prarabdha, your body and mind will undergo some experiences till the body falls dead. But you had tattva darshan, fundamental understanding of what reality is, what Atma is, you have already achieved. And therefore, when the body falls, you are liberated. That is Videha Mukti. That we had studied just before. So here what Rama is asking, oh Lord, if somebody is doing some sadhana, he has not crossed the first three steps. What are they? Subhecha, Vicharana, Tanumanusha. So he has just made his mind a little sharp, Tanumanusha. He's just refined his consciousness. He hasn't reached the level of Sattvapati, he dies. Where does he go? That is a question. So what happens to him? Bhagavan is saying, Eka matha ditiyam bat ditiyam bhumika muta. So if he has completed either the first or second or third, arudhasya, and that fellow has not yet reached that final thing, he's ascending that, mrutasya atha, and he dies. Kidrisi Bhagavan Gati, what kind of a life he gets? What is his Gati? Where does he go? What was he experience? Purva hi sapta bhumoyo vakhyataha. I have already explained to you the seven bhumis earlier. Tatra nitya nitya vastu viveka purvakadi iha mutra bhoga iha mutrartha bhoga vairagya वैराग्यात् समदम श्रद्धा तितिक्षा सर्वकर्म संन्यासादि पुरस्सरा मुमुक्षा शुभेच्छाख्या प्रथमा भूमिका. Okay, I think we will do these details tomorrow because it will take a longer time. So we'll stop here because there is a long debate on how to sort of what happens, and each step we will again explain, and I'll also remind you, and it will take a little time. We cannot do it in 2 minutes that we have. So we'll stop here. So this is a kind of a detour. Bhagavan has already explained what is the meaning of Tatratang Buddhi Sanyogam Lavate Purvadehikam Vajasate Jatato Bhuiha Sansidho Kurunandana. And here is a detour, same dialogue on sadhana of the Yoga Vrashta. He is trying to explain in the light of the dialogue for a yogic sadhana, not the Vedanta as it is mentioned here, but from the yogic perspective, in the light of what Yoga Vasishtha talks about it. So we'll take that up tomorrow. We'll stop here. So I'll switch off the YouTube live stream, but we'll have the Santi Mantras and all of the Google.